Hey everyone, it's Dr. Baird here. Today we're covering how to hip hinge, especially for beginners. So the hip hinge is one of the most important movements that really everybody should have a solid understanding of, but especially somebody who's been dealing with knee pain, back pain, hip pain, really pain anywhere in the body. This is a movement that we teach to all of our clients. We've seen a lot of those common mistakes that happen. So what we want to do with this video is kind of cover those common mistakes so that you have a really understanding of what the hip hinge should look like and the things to watch out for to make sure that you're doing it correctly. So I'll go ahead and get started. First thing is we want to watch our knees. So the first thing is to start with loose knees. A lot of times when people are learning it, they have a tendency to lock out their knees and do a hip hinge like this. Again, we want loose knees and then we want to send the hips back. The next thing, again, regarding our knees, and this is kind of the hard part to get right, is that we're not actively bending our knees, but you are allowing the knees to bend. So what I mean by that, I start with loose knees, but then all that movement is at my hips. So again, there is a little bit of knee bend here, but I'm not kind of squatting down. This is not the movement that we're going for. That's more of a squat. The hinge is really just sending those hips back. And that leads into the next common mistake, is that we really want to make sure that first movement, or all this movement, is sending the hips backwards. So another common thing you see is, again, people will more come with their trunk forward. So the hip hinge looks like this. You can see my legs are kind of still straight. Technically a hip hinge, but again, if I start adding any weight to this, you're really going to feel it in the low back. So again, we want to start with loose knees, but then that movement is sending those hips back. And you can tell, again, my center of gravity is going to be over my knees. It prevents that wear and tear on the knees. So it's really important that we focus on sending the knees back. The next thing we want to watch for is how far we go down. So it's really important when we're hip hinging that we keep that neutral spine, a nice straight spine. And what you'll find is a lot of people go too low. So what I mean by that, loose knees, send the hips back. I feel tension in the hamstrings here. Now I could go lower, but you can see I'm rounding my back. And that, again, over time is going to be something that really irritates your back, especially if you start to add weight to this movement. So we only want to go as low until we feel that tension in the hamstring. So again, loose knees, send the hips back. For me, right about there, tension in the hamstrings. I don't need to go any lower. It's not about how low you could go. I could go lower, but again, all that movement is in the low back. And the last thing to watch out for is a lot of times people, when they initiate that sending the hips back, they don't have control of their pelvis. And so what happens is that first movement is almost like they rock their pelvis forward and then they reach back. And again, that already puts a good amount of pressure on my low back, just like that. So to correct that, you're gonna do like a 25% contraction of your abs. So that's going to hold that pelvis in place, prevent it from rocking forward. And so again, contracting the abs, reaching back, that pelvis can't rock forward. So we'll kind of piece it all together so you can see what it looks like. First, loose knees. Second, sending those hips back, making sure that you've got a little contraction of the abs. And then again, just going to where you feel tension in the hamstrings. Really pay attention to the tension in the hamstrings, because you're going to start using that as you start to add weight and as you start to lift things off the ground. So there you have it. That is how to properly hip hinge. Give it a little bit of practice before you start adding weights. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out. Thanks for watching.